So, welcome to the final episode of Employer Content Club series. And what we're talking about today is the 5 pillars of success when it comes to creating content over the next 12 months. We're going to talk about conversations we've had over the last episodes in the series, but really keen for me and Chris to be getting right down into the detail to give you the tools that are going to help you do great content over the next 12 months. So let's get on with the chat. So Chris, hey, it's good we're in the studio at last.
We are. What a nice studio it is as well.
It's lovely. It's great to be in London. It's
Absolutely,
great.
yeah.
And look, I think the series that we've done, co-created how to build authentic content with your employees. It's been great. We've had some great conversations, haven't we? Let's talk a little bit about the series and why we've done it.
Yeah, well, let's kick off from the top. So I think we're probably about 10 to 12 weeks into the series now.
Yeah,
It must be.
absolutely. Fundamentally, the reason we're doing this
Yeah,
series, and shout out to Vouch for getting involved in
absolutely.
supporting
Yeah.
this, and in the team, been great getting involved in this, is this thing about why this series and why co-created.
hmm
Because actually, it's really important to be able to enable in-house teams and enable employees to be able to be part of the content creation process.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's not just about turning up to a shoot or being asked to, like, rat-a-tat-tat 5, 10 questions and then going, right, we got it. Is actually how can in-house teams and solo practitioners work with employees to build truly authentic content, and how to do it in an affordable way.
And look, something you and I speak a lot about is the fact that a lot of the teams that find themselves responsible for bringing these projects together and bringing the content together, they're understaffed, under-resourced.
Yeah.
They've very rarely got, even manageable budgets to work with.
It's true.
So I think one of the reasons, certainly for me, and I think you share the same sentiment, but the reason we wanted to kick off this co-created series is that there are ways and means of bringing teams together, communities together, leaning on other parts of a business
Mm.
to lend ideas, and just get involved in the overall process to make it much easier. And you can actually squeeze an awful lot more juice out of the fruit than you probably think if you kind of look in various other directions.
Yeah.
So I think this series and developing the community in the way that we have, I think we're on a really nice kind of road to helping practitioners get to that place.
Very true. I think, and it's no surprise we've come up with this series because of what Employer Content Club is about.
Yeah.
As we both felt, we talked about this for a while, and it's really great to see it actually happening. Is that event in May was fantastic. This thing about talking about content creation strategically and the operational side of things is often a fraction of conversation at,
Yeah,
at
yeah.
events and in communities. It's me putting my hand up all the time, wanting to ask too many questions, but it's because I felt there wasn't the space for it. So
Yeah.
it's really great. It's really great that, you know, there is a need for it, and people have said it's great that this is being set up. So I'm really excited to see what is coming over the next 12 months.
So we're obviously here. One of the main reasons we're here today is to talk about the 5 pillars
Mm.
of employer content creation. So let's just jump straight into it.
Nice.
I think you were going to maybe kick off with pillar number 1. What is
Yeah.
it? And
So
what's it all
look, I
about?
wanted to talk about this thing about creating the space to think differently.
Mhm.
I think everyone's so busy. It's always really easy just to be focused on what's in front of your very nose. And I think, especially when you're a solo or you've got a small team, and there's lots of demands on your role. But I think giving yourself the space is very underrated. I remember being at the Recruit Marketing Awards when we did, that was our second episode of this series, talking to somebody, and they said, like, when they finally had some time, breathing space, they took a step back and thought about a campaign,
Mm.
briefed the team about it, and they got some really good content off the back of it. So I think being in the right mindset is really important, which means there's a few things. One is stepping well away from your usual workspace
Yeah.
and finding like a space in your office, whether at home or actually at work, where you can be in a more creative flow.
Yeah.
I've got this thing called airplane mode,
Mm.
which means notifications off. It's not easy, but it really works. Notifications off, um, find a space. I find a space which is preferably like sofa area, nice and comfortable, got a coffee in tow, and straight away that change of environment, rather than being in my normal desk,
Yeah.
make work so much. And I use that for kind of more creative, creative tasks.
Yeah.
So I think finding different places to work are really important. It's a challenge when you're like, especially if you're at work in an office, and there's that thing about wanting to be present
Yeah.
and not wanting to go off. But it's so valuable because you just otherwise you get dragged into the day to day. So I think that's really important, and that can even be things like you and the team. If you haven't got a team, maybe you and someone else in another department you work closely with, just going, let's block out 2 hours. Maybe it's a long lunch.
Mm.
Block out 2 hours. I've done it before. Going to the Tate Modern in
Mm.
London and just with the team and just spending a couple of hours, have a nice lunch and
Mm.
just a different environment. And the things just spark off the back of that. We'll go to events. The energy you get from in-person events if you go to the right ones,
Absolutely.
fantastic.
And I think there's real beauty as well in like not always having a really structured plan. Like
Yeah,
I think there can be often there can be a real worry in that we know we need to create content. We've got all of these actions. We've got all this stuff that needs to get done.
mm,
When are we going to do it? How are we going to get it done? But like you say, taking a step back, reducing the pressure, and treating the process a little bit like a journaling process. So a
yeah,
journaling that you would do for your personal life,
yeah,
trying to apply those kind of similar principles
mm,
to your working life
mm,
and just thinking about everything that's going on in your like orbit.
yeah,
And it might not just be about the job that's in front of you and the tasks that you need to do,
mm,
because they're often the things that you're thinking of
mm,
with your work. But there's so much going on, even in your personal life, that's impacting your job, and
it's true.
there's just so much going on in your world that still touches the world of work,
Mm,
that is still relevant to the job that you do.
mm,
That's not necessarily the doing stuff. And again, those ideas will come to you when you're least expecting them.
it's true.
So getting into the habit of maybe you've just jumped off a treadmill, you've just
Mm,
like me, maybe attempted a 5K and you've managed to do 3.5 and
yeah,
you've just
exactly.
jumped off and you're
Oh
sweating.
well.
But those ideas are pinging.
Mm,
Journal them, get them
exactly.
down, note them down, come back to them when it's a good time. But
Mm.
you'll find yourself, you're anything like me, in your notes with 15, 20 bullet points,
Oh,
and all these ideas are sparking.
it's amazing.
Then all of a sudden, you can take these things in so many different directions.
Yeah. Like, I'm writing a guide at the moment which goes into this in more detail.
Yeah.
I think actually we should have this as a separate piece. It could be a whole episode in its own right. But
Yeah.
I think that thing about kind of, and again, it's not easy to do, and this is as much advice for myself, a reminder for myself,
Yeah.
which is, we're kind of in Eisenhower's matrix of prioritization here, aren't we? Which
Yeah.
is, I think it's box 2, which is the important but not urgent.
Yeah.
And actually, it's those things that are going to really move things forward. So being able, for me, that manifests itself in going, what are the, say, 3 absolute core things that need to be done today?
Yeah.
And of not being worried about putting some things back. Of course, there are priorities in terms of other people's priorities maybe getting in the way, but ultimately try and stay very focused on those 3 things that are going to really, really help. So you allocate time for that. If you allocate the space for it as well, then I think then those ideas pop. And like I've done it so many times, where it's like you get this deluge of ideas, and if you see there with the team as well,
Yeah.
it gives them the opportunity to get involved. But
Yeah.
let's go on to the next one. Budget, doing better with less.
Yeah. So budgets, doing better, doing more with less. I think there's so much we could cover here,
Mm,
but I think the first thing that springs to mind for me is that there is a common misconception, I think, that to kick off any form of employer content strategy project
mm,
requires 50 stakeholders to agree,
yeah,
requires 50 grand in budget,
mm,
and it will probably take 6 months to even kick off from initial inception.
mm,
And I think the world that we're in today, that's not the world that we're in today. And
mm,
I think it's a really healthy thing for us to try and just completely move that mindset to,
mm,
in 48 hours from initial inception to delivering something
Mm.
of value, you could do something in 48 hours,
Absolutely.
let
Absolutely.
alone needing all of these, stakeholder ones.
Mm.
But I think, for me, what's hopefully actionable, with that kind of mindset is probably, if you haven't kicked off any sort of strategy like this before, it's probably just thinking quite small to start with.
Mm.
Because I think the beauty in, breaking down projects and, starting smaller is that you can case study things
Yes.
and you don't need much budget.
Mm.
You might need buy-in, but it's probably from one person, maybe
Mm.
two.
Mm.
So all of a sudden you've packaged it into this, like, what could seem like this enormous task
Mm.
into something really manageable, really quick to execute.
Mm.
And also, you'll probably figure out if it was actually of value or not quite quickly as well.
Exactly.
And if it's
Exactly.
not of value, you haven't got it wrong. You
No,
just
it's
know
true.
that
It's
that's a
true.
door you probably don't want to knock on
It's
again,
part of the
which is
process.
really helpful,
Mm.
isn't it?
It's
Because it's
learning.
like it's just
It's
learning.
learning.
So
Yeah.
it's like, okay, we go to the next door
Mm.
and we knock on that one and we see if we can open it up. Um, and I know that's really cliche, but I think there isn't really a bad idea. You
Mm.
can't really execute a rubbish project because it is all part of that learning process.
It's
What
true.
what content's landing, what's not,
Mm.
which channels are engaging, which aren't,
Mm.
etc., etc. Um, so yeah, I think moving into next year, having that kind of doing more with less,
Mm.
not necessarily thinking about, how are we going to completely, revolutionize our employee content strategy across our entire business, across all of these different countries, et
Mm.
cetera, et cetera. Just really zoning in, smaller teams, smaller departments, smaller projects, testing, iterating, improving,
Mm.
low budgets, because you will start unlocking some really, really cool doors.
It's true.
And that's when you can start thinking a little bit bigger. You can take these case studies to other people in the business. You'll get budgets for bigger projects.
Mm.
You'll start getting buy-in from other territories and other regions, and the thing should grow arms and legs from that point.
Well, it's like there's lessons here from business ownership, isn't there? And
Mm.
I'm going to mention a book here, which is Eric Ries's The Lean Startup.
Hmm.
It's great. That talks about this thing about iteration and
Yeah,
agile approach to to testing and adapting and scaling
yeah,
ideas. Because if you spend a lot of time developing a service,
yeah,
but it's being stuck in theory all the time,
absolutely.
you're going to want to hope it works,
Yeah,
but often they fail because they're not being stress tested. So this ties in nicely with because episode 2 is me at the Recruit Marketing
yeah,
Awards, and conversations around budgets is like budgets feel tighter,
mm,
but actually what it's about is the budgets are actually they are there,
yeah,
but there's just that concern about how much they should invest in something.
yeah,
So taking that iterative approach is really important. Going back to your case studies point, this is literally about building a business case.
yeah,
And I've done it with a client where we started off by doing Zoom calls, Zoom interviews,
yeah,
and then capturing content through mobile phones, and then we ended up doing podcasts,
yeah.
and then level up doing documentaries. But that wouldn't have been possible if we went straight in and going, you need to do this
Hmm.
first of all. So bit by bit, you're building a business case, and you're not doing the classic employer branding thing, which is, oh, I'm trying to get this budget of £100,000 plus, or £50,000 plus, or £200,000 plus, because of course you should be doing employer branding. You need to show return on investment.
Yeah,
So yeah, I think that's iterative campaigning,
yeah,
iterative budget spending
yeah.
to then test and scale is like really, really important.
Yeah, I agree. And just kind of leaning into that, my kind of final thought on it is try wherever possible. One thing I've definitely fallen foul of over the years is knowing that engaging content, it is a necessity,
Mm.
and it elevates the experience and it engages people in a way, certainly from a talent attraction point of view, engages people in a way that you're not able to do by more traditional attraction means. So,
Mm.
but knowing that, but not actually gathering the data and the feedback to be able to prove that and showcase that to powers that be that might not work in that part of the business and fully understand it.
Mm.
I've started to realize the importance of that. So something that we've been doing certainly over the last more so over the last 18, 24 months is trying to gather that feedback and that data
Mm.
from the right people and packaging that up as part of the case study.
Yeah.
So the people that are involved in the
Yeah.
content, over time, they should start, feeling just, that there should be a stronger kind of advocacy kind of, bond to
Yeah.
their position in the business.
Yeah.
So keep talking to them about that and how being involved in the content has had an impact on them, whether it's positive or negative. You want like the proper feedback. You don't want to
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
go biased, and you
Yeah.
do
It's
love it,
true.
don't you?
Yeah.
But get that honest feedback. But if you can build a case that these people are starting to feel a little bit more belonging in the business, they're feeling more included in their role, their voice is being heard,
Yeah.
gather that feedback. And on the same token, if you're using that content in whichever kind of stream in the business for
Mm.
talent attraction or whatever it might be, when you're speaking to the candidates that have maybe engaged with whatever they've engaged with, whether it's a job ad or whatever it might be, ask the questions.
Mm.
Did the content land with you?
Yeah.
Did it have an impact?
Yeah.
Again, not in a biased way, you want the honest feedback, but all of a sudden you're building not just this business case around the content, but you're getting this really interesting insights that
Mm.
have a huge impact on like whether you can actually grow this thing into the beast you want to grow it
It's
in.
true. Very
And
true.
and I think for a lot of the people, certainly at kind of C-suite and board level, which the people that will eventually unlock the budgets for going,
Mm.
much bigger, that's often the information and the data and the insight that they'll care about.
It's
So
true.
trying to, certainly moving into next year, that's something I really want to ramp up in my own work.
Exactly. And the good thing is now is, there are ways of lo-fi, but no, not doesn't mean lo-fi doesn't mean low quality content.
Mm.
Is a lo-fi ways of capturing content.
Yeah.
These are fantastic. I've
Yeah.
filmed kind of mini documentaries off the back of this, of
Mm.
vlogs off the back of this, but also remote recordings,
Yeah.
whether it's audio or video, tapping into software like, to be honest, like Vouch,
Yeah.
where you've got you've got that link with guidance about questions to answer. You
Yep.
film it and then it gets uploaded. Happy days.
Absolutely.
So I think those are the kind of things that could be done. Even if it's like a conversation where you've just literally got your phone and recording audio,
Yep.
but that can be an article.
Yes.
And then that serialization piece is really important,
Yeah.
because then you get to a situation where there's confidence in the team,
Mhm.
confidence in the business that we're doing this kind of thing, and then all of a sudden, someone senior goes, "Well, that's interesting. That's great. Well, for us to do more of these,
Yeah.
and do it more efficiently, maybe let's invest in some software to help us capture that content better,
Absolutely.
or let's do a full-on shoot, but you've tested it to start with. You know what, we could talk about this as a whole episode, but I think that's something to come back to definitely in the new year. So the classic thing, all right, and when we were speaking to Ali Brown at VCA Animal Hospitals in episode 3
Yep.
about this, which is this: you've got busy vets who are busy looking after pets, looking after animals.
Yeah.
That's their priority, of course, as it should be. How do you get them involved in creating content?
Yeah.
So the what's in it for them piece. So let's talk a bit about that. What's your, because when we were talking and prepping for this, you had some interesting thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think there's a few different things. I think Ali's approach is brilliant because, I think she very much arrived at that particular project as to, you know, there needs to be, just asking people to do it and then being like, oh, yeah, fine. On top of my incredibly busy day job, yeah, no worries. I'll do something that's completely unnatural to me and something I'm not familiar with at all.
Mm.
So, there needs to be a, what's in it for me element. And I think Ali's approach to initially kind of incentivizing people is brilliant. So I think that's something definitely to try and take away from this, because I think once you incentivize people, it might sound as though you're kind of buying their loyalty into the program, but you're not. People often just need that little nudge in the right direction, and once they've been incentivized and once they're kind of become comfortable and familiar with the process, then they're a lot more likely to want to like carry on
It's true.
and help moving forward.
Mm.
But I think another thing, like moving into next year and the emergence of AI around us and the kind of the ability for really small teams to do the work that much larger teams would have been doing kind of
Yeah.
even this year and years gone by.
Yeah.
I think it's more important than ever just to try and be as visible as possible.
It's true.
I think being visible, especially moving into 2026, I think is going to be a superpower for people, particularly people that do feel a bit anxious and do feel a bit vulnerable in their job role
Mm,
because of everything that's going on in the world
mm,
and the uncertainty around, will AI take my job? Will this job be automated? Or
yeah,
will 50%, 70% of my job be automated in 12 months' time, whatever? I think being visible in any type of role gives you a shield of
mm,
some description
it's true.
where you're not just an operator in that job role, you're an advocate in the business
Yeah,
for the business, and you're helping the business in so many more ways than just doing what's on your job description.
yeah, it's true.
So I think that is that's a huge thing in this particular pillar for me moving into next year.
Look, it's like the rise of personal branding, and there's the rise of corporate influencers where literally people are, budgets of I think it's like $22,000 given to somebody in an organization
Yeah, I
to
saw
go and
this.
encourage
Yeah,
um, employees to get involved. So that investing in is 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 actually going. This is an important thing to do.
yeah,
But I think also it's this touching on what you talked about is that visibility is is with substance as well, isn't it? It's about going, and this is why we love doing what we're doing. Yeah, is that what we do is we. It's about giving individuals and teams the platform
yeah,
to show what they know about. To share their opinions, to share their expertise, yes, and to share their stories.
yeah,
And by doing that, you're going to help them in their career while also they are helping the business. And we talked about it before, didn't we? About in we are having a coffee this morning. Is that um, I was working with occupational therapists,
yeah,
and after doing some discovery piece, yes, they wanted to recruit other occupational therapists, but it was actually a need to raise the profile of occupational therapy in the organization and in the health and social care sector.
yeah,
So actually, it was great because we understand that you know, your role and your function in the business and in the health and social care isn't quite understood.
yeah,
It's not just barbecues and bingo. It's not just basket weaving.
yeah,
It's so much more. So that really helped frame it because it's like, excellent, yeah, we do want to fly the flag for our profession, but also for our team in this organization. So that what's in it for them is really, really important. And I think,
mm,
you know, that's the way in which you can then help someone go build out your own personal brand, your own portfolio and presence in the organization.
yeah,
Because it's a bit like hard work and talent. You know,
yeah,
if you've got both,
yeah,
then fantastic. That visibility is so
yeah,
important. And when there's so much noise out there, that visibility is increasingly important, I think.
yeah. Really, really good point.
Yeah.
I think on top of that, I think in every single company, um, it doesn't really matter the size. We're talking from startup scale up through to large enterprise.
Mm,
There's disengagement. Throughout
yeah.
at varying levels, obviously, but
Mm,
there's disengagement. There are people that are slowly reversing out of companies, whether you know about it or not.
yeah.
That's going on, and I think another reason for companies to try and become more passionate about this topic and prioritizing this topic is, I think, giving people the space to have a voice. It almost will become like therapy for a lot of people,
Yeah.
and it will
Absolutely.
unearth a lot of that disengagement, even though you'll very rarely hear it as disengagement,
Yeah.
but there'll be notes coming through.
Yeah.
And if things need to be fixed, they can, if the storytelling is done in the right way and the right questions are being asked and the right sort of things are being
Mm.
unearthed, it can really help with that process
That is,
and
yeah, yeah.
fixing some of those problems. And I think that's often some of the like unspoken stuff
Mm.
that we don't often like talk about or promote so much. But I think it's a really, it's a huge reason why companies should try and become more passionate about this topic.
Well, look, it's like, God, there's me telling you this. You've got a company called Voice.
Yeah,
It's about, you can't underestimate the power of giving somebody a voice.
yeah,
And that thing about you have to look at, you know, Dan Pink's book around was it the surprising truth about what motivates
Mm.
people? This thing about mastery and autonomy, giving people that voice to to share their knowledge and expertise is extremely powerful, not just in terms of trying to attract the right people into business, but to acknowledge that that person has something to say.
Absolutely.
Often those frustrations, those disengagement stats from the global state of the workplace report by Gallup, which is always a great piece of annual research to look at,
Yeah.
is down to things like that of not enough clarity, but also not having that voice
Yeah.
to be able to do that. So employer branding teams have a great opportunity to give people that voice,
Yeah.
and the benefits go far beyond just talent attraction.
Definitely.
Well, again, this is we've got our episode plan sorted out
Yeah.
for next year, haven't
We've got
we?
our next 5
Yeah,
episodes planned in
exactly.
these pillars, I think. Okay, so pillar number 4.
We
We've
are number
got
4. Go on.
quick wins.
Mm.
Yeah, the Agile 4-week sprint.
Is it possible to create content
Can you do
in
it?
for absolutely? I think it's going back to what we talked about. This thing about having that kind of agile mindset.
Mhm.
Yeah. If you're going to want to do like a 5-day shoot,
Yeah.
um, yeah, that might take a bit longer to do. Yeah, absolutely. But there are things you can do um, to test things, which is you know s- have a particular area in mind. Could be often say like find the most stressed hiring manager
Mm,
or recruiter in the business and go, I think there's something we can do for you,
mm,
and not go, but it's going to cost this amount of money. It's going
mm.
to cost this amount of time. It's like, I think there's some quick things we can do here.
Yeah.
Um, so I think do that and get together a group of people that have a vested interest in this.
Mhm.
Not too many, because there's a thing about decision by committee,
Yeah.
but by making it like a smaller piece of work means that the risk is lower,
Yeah.
which means people are, yeah, okay, let's give this a go. So I think get together a group of people and go, right, well, classic strategy thing, look at what we need to achieve,
Mm.
look at who the audience is, um, and let's see what is that bridge between where we are now and where we want to be.
Yeah.
And go, right, let's then create something and use your people. It's like, so Ali talks about this, Police Now talks about this in episode 4, which is about lean on the individuals in your team. If you're a one person,
Yeah.
employer brand or a small team, it can't all lie on yourselves. So call upon people who do the job.
Yeah.
Call upon people who have a vested interest in those vacancies being filled
Absolutely. Yeah.
and get ideas from them.
Yeah.
Because not only does that give you the freedom going, oh, it's not all down to me,
Yeah.
is that you're empowering. And that's why we say co-created, is that feeling of partnership, I
Yeah.
think is really important.
And I think another reason that that is so important, Chris, is that like if you gave me a topic to be passionate about,
Yeah.
like it's probably not going to land. If you ask me to speak about something that I'm passionate about,
Mm.
then it's going to land
Yeah.
because I've come up with the idea, but it's also something that's probably been kind of bubbling for a while,
Mm.
and it's something I want to get out and talk about. And I think it's such good advice because, like you say, it can be so much pressure for these teams to come up with all of the ideas
Yeah.
and then to try and kind of you know put those ideas onto other people for them to execute,
Mm.
but bringing them into the process and giving them the autonomy to ideate
Yeah.
and execute. I think it's surprising how many people you'll see kind of jumping up and down and wanting to help out in that part of the process
Yeah.
because they will ultimately start talking about things that mean a lot to them.
Mm.
And I think back on your point, I'm with you entirely. On those much smaller kind of case studied examples, like when you're a business of the size of VCA with Ali, you need scalable technology.
Mm.
To be Vouch works for them brilliantly.
Yeah.
Capturing the tech, capturing the content, being able to using AI to repurpose content,
Yeah.
distribute content, all that stuff. If you're starting much smaller and you haven't got these budgets, it's not a problem.
Yeah.
Creating a WhatsApp group in that
Oh,
in that
yeah.
group that you were talking
Mm.
about, the line manager or maybe an ambassador in that team creates the engineering Manchester, WhatsApp group. everyone commits to capturing 1 or 2 pieces of content. Maybe
mm,
they have just jumped off the treadmill.
mm,
Maybe they are walking around the park. They're walking their dog, whatever it might be. They're at work, whatever. It doesn't really matter.
mm.
You guys agree. You come up with the ideas collectively, but all commit to uploading 1, 2, 3 pieces of content. It might be a voice note. It
Yeah,
might be a video. It might just be, a piece of text about something that you really feel strongly about.
yeah,
Whatever it is. All of a sudden, 30 days passes and there's like 20 pieces of content in this thing.
exactly.
And it's only in a WhatsApp group, but there's so much you can
It's
then do.
possible, yeah.
So much you can then do. You've started the process
Mm,
of something really, really powerful and really
mm.
special. So, like you and I always talk about, like, there aren't really barriers to entry. I
No,
think there's
not at
just
all.
like barriers to ideas.
Yeah, it's the mindset, which is, I think,
Yeah, exactly.
especially I think with, you know, from what you're talking about, the WhatsApp group, it absolutely is something I've done before. It's fantastic, and it's yes, from that some you're going to get content for video, for audio,
Yep.
but also for written content
Yep.
as well. But also when the ideation process as well. So yes, you'll have say a kickoff meeting,
Yep.
but look, there are enough meetings in the world, yeah,
Yeah.
and we know back to back to back to back to back meetings aren't necessarily the most productive way of living or working life.
Yeah.
So actually, I found I've done it where actually we've not had to do meetings because on a WhatsApp group we've worked asynchronously of voice notes.
Yeah.
So based on what we talked about, I think this is my idea. What do you think about it?
Yeah.
Oh, that's not bad. It's like, oh yeah, that what you think is really powerful because it's like it's okay to have a half idea.
Yeah.
So what do you think? And then someone comes back and yeah, you can be doing it where they're, just gone out for a walk. Oh,
Yeah.
I've been thinking about that. But the barrier to doing that is disappears.
Yeah.
It's not just a meeting thing, it's those found moments in your
Absolutely.
day to day. And that does mean that actually you are creating like mini focus groups
Yeah.
in something like a WhatsApp group.
Yeah.
You are also using it as a way of creating content. And even like, it's kicking off a discussion,
Yeah.
which is right, we're going to talk about this. What's your view about this audio note?
Yeah.
What's your view about this audio note?
Absolutely.
Just like this is kid in the candy store stuff in terms of the content you get from that. So
Absolutely. Yeah.
again, it was something we revisit.
And
I
I think,
think,
and I think a really nice thing about that as well, going back to the previous disengagement point,
mm,
is because you're all being really open with each other about all of these different
mm,
topics. If there is disengagement or people are a little bit unhappy about a situation, through that really open conversation and that dialogue that you're exchanging, things will start being unearthed and you'll be able to fix things,
mm,
probably 6 months faster than you would if that was closed down and everyone was just getting on with their day jobs at their desk doing the doing.
mm,
So I think there are so many reasons to like prioritize
yeah,
those kind of strategies.
exactly.
So I think that takes us to the final pillar, Chris, pillar number 5.
AI means that one can be a lot more efficient
Mm.
with things. But is it about being more efficient in the next 12 months or is it about building experience more? Because in the world where, AI is making things a lot easier, but also there's obviously criticisms about things like AI slop,
Mm.
you know, what is the role of experience in that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point. We've been surrounded by the efficiencies that AI affords us for a number of years now.
Yeah.
I really feel that 2025 has been the year where it's been everywhere.
Yeah.
Every nook and cranny has like had AI and automation and
Mm,
efficiency woven into it in
mm,
some way, shape, or form. So I think next year, where companies are already maturing to processes and maturing to the efficiencies that AI can give you, I think people that are more focused on experience with the help of AI, definitely. It's
yeah,
not at the like
absolutely.
it's not like one or the other.
Mm,
It's definitely not. But I think so many people, leaders, companies will be almost exclusively focused on efficiency
yeah.
next year, reducing team sizes, automating this process over this process over this
Mm,
process, that I'm pretty convinced that experience will take a hit next year.
mm,
And it will have to pick back up because I think people will start seeing the negative impact that those crazy efficiencies, they're working in many ways, but
mm,
taking the hit on experience, over that efficiency, I think will really hurt people.
Yeah.
So I think doubling down on experience moving into next year, making sure that you're delivering experiences that cut through the noise, experiences that are really well thought out and they've been brainstormed amongst passionate people
Mm.
with the efficiencies of AI woven into that process, definitely
No doubt.
using some
Mm.
automation and AI to help with that
Mm.
process. But I think, doubling down on making sure the experience that you're putting out into those, to those audiences, um, I think moving into next year is more important than ever because
Mm.
there is going to be so much efficiency noise over here
Mm.
where people are looking to do more with less, squeeze loads more juice out of the fruit with
Yeah.
smaller budgets.
Mm.
But those people that are really focused in that one lane, they will, I think, really close the curtain on experience.
Yeah,
And I
like
think there's a huge competitive advantage to doubling down on experience in
100%.
2026.
And it's like, look, I was at a tech conference a couple of months ago at a round table. We were talking about how organizations have implemented AI,
Mm.
not just in the employer branding and TA space, but how they're using AI in their organizations. And kind of, I felt I had to say something. Is like, wait a minute, is AI? There's a danger that AI is going to be can we do more,
Mm.
but it's not. It's about how can we do better.
Yes.
Going back
Yeah.
to the thing about not doing more with less, but doing better with less.
Mm.
So that experience piece is really important. I think it's a bit like Mr. Beast, he says, and this is so true, is that people see the effort that has been put into producing content.
Mm.
That in itself is a very powerful thing
Yeah.
because actually is a respect for someone's time that content has been created, whichever levels of production quality we're looking at here.
Yeah.
So that experience thing, I think, yes, you could be the most efficiently run operation as possible, but if the content that's going out there is just meh,
Yeah.
is bland, it's a hat tip to an employer bland
Yeah.
podcast. Love your podcast. If you get emails back straight away,
Yeah.
if you're in a candidate journey, it's like that's not enough. It
Absolutely.
needs to be, oh wow, oh that's good. Oh, they've decided to send me an email with a video of one of the senior leaders of the division that I might join
Yeah.
talking about why he does what he does.
Absolutely. Yeah.
You know,
And and,
fantastic.
and I agree. I agree, wholeheartedly with that. And I think as well, next year, and I've already seen it this year, but AI and the efficiencies that it gives you, there'll be a huge rise in the kind of amplification of vanity metrics.
Mm.
It's like, oh, we've implemented this piece of tech, that piece of tech, automated this, and this, and we now post a job role and we get 200 applications in 24
Yeah,
hours.
yeah,
And it's but there are C-suite execs that think, wow, that's amazing.
yeah, exactly.
This is working.
Yeah,
And it's like those kind of vanity metrics are so dangerous in our industry. You know,
massively.
that that isn't efficient. That's not good process
Mm.
unless you've got some exceptional way of handling those applications in a period of time.
But it's extremely expensive and time consuming. Yeah,
But you're probably not reaching the right people.
yeah.
You're probably not handing off those candidates in the best way possible.
Mm.
You're probably not doing your employer brand any favors at all. So I think it's also about thinking about the metrics and the what's important to you and what is really important and what is ego massaging
Mm.
vanity,
Mm.
and just making sure you're not over here too much.
So that's our five. It's
Yes.
gone. It's gone super quickly.
Really
There's a
quick.
lots of things we can tap on, I think, and over the next 12 months, we'll be going to these elements, these pillars in more detail
Yeah.
for sure. But yeah, really enjoyed it. Mate, it's great. It's great to get you in the studio.
Always good
Our
catching up with you,
first
mate.
time actually doing an episode in the
I
studio in
know.
person. It's
Under the
fantastic.
bright lights.
Yeah, well, this is a good example actually
Yeah.
of like we booked out this fantastic studio
Yeah.
for an hour. So these are ways which you can find really agile and cost effective ways of capturing content.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah, mate, it's been good.
It's been
Always a
really good
pleasure,
fun.
man.
Always is.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you, mate.
Well, thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. Now, Employer Content Club is something very close to mine and Chris's heart. So, really want people to pop over to the link somewhere near this episode and check out Employer Content Club. We had our first event back in May. It was great. We had 15 people turn up and we had some great conversations. We are having more events in the pipeline. So sign up to find out about those events, but also go to the link to actually find out more about the other episodes we've done in our co-created series. We really want you guys to get involved, contribute your thoughts about the kind of topics we should be talking about, and also the things we should be doing in person, because the more we do these kind of things, the more we're going to raise the profession as a whole. So thanks for watching.